So excited to moderate the last part of our morning session, a fireside chat. And this is incredibly fortuitous because my husband is a big rock climber, and 2 months ago we were walking through Brooklyn, and I had my 2-month-old on my stomach and was wearing a North Face backpack, and he was like, "Oh my God, stop! I need to take a picture. Hashtag Move Mountains. They have this campaign. It's all about women. It's going to be awesome." And I was like, "Oh, this marketing is working. You are reaching your target." So we are going to hear from Tom Herbst, who's the Vice President of Global Marketing at the North Face, and we're going to hear from Hilaree Nelson, who is just a badass adventurer, ski mountaineer, explorer, and they're going to tell their story, because I think, like many, many, many industries, there are too few women in the outdoor adventure market, and there are too few role models. As we heard, you cannot be what you cannot see, and this applies to this industry as well. So let's watch a quick video, and then we will bring Hilaree and Tom up to the stage.
So I first met Hilaree at one of the North Face Athlete Summits, and she's definitely one of those people that has a sparkle in her eye. She always wants to do a little bit more than everybody else. On Denali, one of the snowboarders on the team didn't think he was going to make it. And I just remember her looking at him and being like, "All right, this is the time you have to dig deep, like pull it together." And just seeing Lucas being like, "Okay," and she got him up to the summit. That's the kind of person she is. She's almost trying to downplay who she is, what she's accomplished. I think it's really incredible to have a role model like Hilaree. I think about how she carries herself. She just has a lot of composure. It's always good to know she's out there.
Love it.
Hi.
Hello, welcome. So I am not a climber, although I've climbed some in the gunks. I've climbed at Brooklyn Boulders. I've done my stuff. How did you even get into this incredible industry?
It wasn't really even a job per se when I got into it, I guess. I grew up in the Northwest in Seattle, Washington, and I did not grow up in the mountains. I grew up mostly on a boat and sort of lived up in the wilds of the Inside Passage in Canada, and I think that taught me a lot about suffering, and I really like to suffer. And eventually that led me into the mountains, and there's a lot of suffering.
Can you just tell us what type 1 and type 2 fun are?
We were just having, has anybody here heard of type 1 and type 2 fun?
Brilliant.
Well, I just added type 3 as well. So type 1 fun is when you're actually having fun in the moment, which we all like to do. Type 2 fun, you don't really discover until you've had some time to reflect on what you were doing, and you're like, that was actually fun. Type 3 is when you have time to reflect on what you did, and it still wasn't fun. That's type 3. There's a little bit of that in what I do.
Can you tell us a little bit about that video?
So I have been doing this now. I think I fall into the old category. I've been doing this for about 20 years, climbing mountains, and I've been on upwards of 40+ expeditions all over the globe. Jimmy Chin is also a very well-known photographer and climber, explorer, and I've done a number of things with him. And I think it just goes back to something I feel very strongly about, and that is being passionate about something. People often ask me, "Oh, do you want your kids to be climbers, be a climber like you?" And my answer is typically no, not at all, actually. But I want them to have a passion, and I think I believe that a passion in life is a really strong compass. And if my kids could have that, then I've done something right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, a day in the life for me is here at this conference or sitting behind my desk. Lots of type 3 fun.
That's
type 2? Oh, type 2 fun. What is a day in the life of you as an adventurer and a skier and mountaineer?
Okay, so this reminds me of a time when I had a 2- and a 4-year-old when I went to Everest. I was climbing 2 8,000-meter peaks, and so I was gone for a little while, and I had to train, and my kids were quite young. So my day in my life was taking these 2- and 4-year-olds skiing, and I had my 4-year-old on a harness in front of me going down the mountain, so I'm kind of restrain his speed, and the 2-year-old is on my hip with his skis on, because that was the only way I could get him on the chairlift. So he's kicking me, and then he takes his hands and puts it over my eyes while I'm holding the 4-year-old, and that was like my day in the life of how I train. It's mental training. It's all mental.
I can't even go to the supermarket with my 2 kids, and she is like hurtling herself down mountains. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So that's quite. I think your boys are gonna find their passion seeing such a passionate mom about what they do. So we've talked about you can't be what you can't see. There weren't a lot of role models for you. What was the advice that you got coming up as a female climber, or just a climber in general, and sort of doing this life?
So, I mean, again, I feel like I'm talking about my kids a lot, but when I was first
Bring
pregnant...
it. Men should talk about them too, for real.
When I was pregnant with this is the best advice I was ever given, and it's played a role in my life and my career moving forward, being a female with kids and continuing to climb. When I was pregnant with my first kid, I was pretty terrified about how that was going to play into my fear capabilities, how I was going to handle fear and risk moving forward and continue with my job. And this woman, a really good friend of mine, she said, you know, however you choose to raise your kids is going to be normal to them. And so I grew up in a very traditional family. My mom didn't work. She stayed home and raised her kids. And I can flash forward 10 years from now and taking my kids to Nepal when they were 6 and 8 and climbing to 16,000 feet with them while I went on to climb an 8,000-meter peak is actually normal to them. They're 9 and 10, and it's normal. So I guess my message here is let's create a new normal. Let's get rid of even going back to sort of women move mountains. I work really hard to want to take that female disclaimer out of the sentence. The first female to do this, the first female CEO, the first female to tie her shoes. Let's get to a point where we're just the first. We just are on an equal playing field. And I think we do that through role models and through how we bring up the next generation.
Awesome. So, So Tom, North Face is a leading outdoors brand. Perhaps many of your customers are men. I don't know the demographics. What was the decision to say we want to dedicate our next campaign and our true core of our brand to female role models and women moving mountains?
Yeah, so I think the basis of it is that we think that the term corporate responsibility is redundant. Those aren't 2 separate ideas. Yep. There's one idea within that. And particularly as the leader in the space, we have an incredibly big megaphone, an incredibly big platform to get messages out there. And it's funny that Hilaree just told that story about her kids and the conversation we had, because that was actually the impetus for this entire thought process at the North Face. We call it see more, be more, instead of see it, be it, yep. Same thing. And it ran across a bit of research that basically said, people are 60% more likely to achieve a goal if they have a role model that they can relate to. And our brand purpose is to move the world forward through exploration. We want the world to progress. Exploration is the way that we do it. So we just started, thinking about what would it be like if you're born into a world where your mom climbs Everest? Like, how does that change the perception of what's possible? Whether you're a girl, a boy, or gender neutral, those are the things that are important to us as we think about creating the next generation of explorers. Mm-hmm. Because we truly believe that if everyone really grabbed onto what it means to be an explorer, which is about finding your place in the world, putting yourself out of your comfort zone to see how you connect to the world and people around you, sharing ideas, sharing cultures, being empathetic, that the world would be a much better place. So we set out without really saying what we were doing, but just doing it. So,
is there any reason why now? Why today? Like, obviously, women have been moving mountains forever. Why was now the right time?
we felt like, as industry leaders, the industry was just behind. And you know, quite frankly, part of it was new people coming into the business and taking a hard look at what we've done, and being pretty honest that I think for most people in the room, when you think about the North Face or even Patagonia, who we respect a lot, you know, if you close your eyes and what do you picture? You picture a white dude on the side of a mountain. And that's just not going to create the possibility of what we think the next generation is up for and able to do.
So talking about the next generation, we've been talking about power of partnerships and cross-sector partnerships. You guys have a really deep partnership with the Girl Scouts. Talk about that. Why were they the brand to make this come to life?
Yeah, so like any good corporation, once we got into this, we did a lot of research. We talked to a lot of our consumers. We talked to a lot of our athletes in depth. We have such an amazing team, you said it, of just badass women who, you know, not only are they climbing Everest, but they're also raising 2 boys, and they're nurses, and they're teachers, and they're entrepreneurs. And what we heard when we talked to all of these women was that, like, they know that the glass ceiling exists. They don't need us to remind them, right? They know that men have it when like, as a corporation, they don't need us swinging in, you know, and mansplaining the situation that, like, you're empowered. They're already empowered. Like,
I feel better already. Thanks.
Yeah. What they said to us was, just be. Just, like, literally just be the change you want to be, like, not to get too deep. And so the way that we approached it was to say, cool, we're just going to tell the stories of the people that we think are amazing role models. And we're going to find ways in culture to actually do what we want to do, which is create this next generation. So we started looking around, and a few things were important to us. Reach was important because we're a big company, but also supporting those people who needed it most. And so we met the Girl Scouts of America, and you know, they're in a period of change themselves. People think about 2 things when they think about the Girl Scouts of America: either cookies, it's actually the first one, or I was a Girl Scout. Right. And as we started talking to them and working with them, we found really shared ground in terms of the power of getting young girls outside and giving them experiences in nature. And we felt like together we can really affect a lot of young girls who would benefit from it.
Awesome. And so this campaign wasn't just about amazing adventurers. Why did you choose to include America Ferrera, other sort of women role models in this campaign?
Yeah, for a couple of reasons. I mean, one is, you know, as we talk to our athletes, there's so much more than athletes, right? As everyone in this room is more than one thing. But we also believe that the spirit of exploration lives on the mountain, but it lives in everyone, really. And so we feel like we have an opportunity to expand what exploration can mean into the world of STEM, into underserved communities that maybe don't have the ability to do that today.
So this campaign is truly inspirational. We're so excited about it. You want to do the right thing. But what are the goals? Like, how do you know that this campaign is a success? How do you judge it?
That's a really good question. Part of the goals are how much we're getting people to be involved in it. So part of this campaign is for people to share women in their world who are moving mountains, whatever definition that is, and we've seen incredible consumer engagement. We're actually have started a few industry-wide initiatives in terms of inviting our fellow brands to also sort of change the face of exploration and make sure that we have an even representation of gender across the outdoor industry. We're doing quite a bit there. And then we have goals internally as well. The industry typically has been one that's been relatively male-dominated. So we put goals and measurements in place. You're laughing at it a little bit.
Understand it?
in terms of how we recruit, retain, promote, develop talent.
Awesome, very cool. So when we were talking about this campaign again is all about exploration, moving mountains, and so when we were talking, I was like, exploration, obviously, mountains, getting to the top of the peak, and you were like, no, I don't see exploration that same way. Like, how do you define it for you?
Well, if I go back kind of again to how I grew up in a family that struggled a lot with depression and alcoholism and things like that. And also sort of where the only place where I was on equal footing with my brother was in the outdoors. And so the outdoors served a dual purpose for me. It kept me sane, which is always good. And then the second part was that that was where I could be on an equal footing with the sort of the male counterparts in my family, was through sports. And so that's how I went down this path. And I guess I just think that the outdoors is a way, this exploration is a way, whether it's scaling a mountain, which now I'm in my mid-40s, I've actually found that the harder exploration for me is being active in other parts of my life, activism, taking a political stance. I work with an organization called Protect Our Winters who mobilizes athletes who have a really large social media outreach that is nonpartisan. And even though I'm, in my mid-40s, I'm a little bit cool, sort of, to like the younger generation, and so I can kind of influence them. And so I've been finding my voice in this regard, and to me, that's exploration. So going back to how I originally got outdoors, I found that through risk-taking, through pushing my boundaries, and sometimes I do that a little excessively, perhaps, but pushing my boundaries really helped keep me even-keeled. And then to take that a step further, that exploration, pushing boundaries outside of what I now know in the outdoors, but pushing it into something new for me, that is what exploration means. And so that's why I think, especially with a brand like North Face, we can broaden that spectrum through this campaign to reach kids to get outdoors who have problems, like literal tactile problems that they need to solve. You can solve those when you give yourself space, and you can find space outside. So I think that's a huge part of it. And then the second part is just explore things that make you uncomfortable, because that's how you get to know yourself. For me, I found it in the mountains. Now as an older adult, I find it through activism, through trying to get this big, younger millennial generation to combat the baby boomers and vote and do things like that. And that's an awkward, uncomfortable place for me. So there's exploration open to each and every one of us at every stage of our lives. And that's just through doing something that makes you uncomfortable.
That's awesome. Not only are you like climbing mountains, but you're influencing the next generation. So I love it. That's
Trying.
Cool. I think the most important question is you're wearing a shirt that says walls aren't meant for climbing. And how do I get one?
www.tnf.com.
There you go. There you go. Massive, massive, massive round of applause for my panel. Thank you guys so much. Awesome.
Thank you.
Great.
That was awesome.